The facts are very, very clear. The United States is heading toward a debt crisis. The only solutions will be truly painful for us all. That doesn't have to be our future. The way we respond to this challenge will ultimately define our generation. We can choose a path to prosperity. Let's take a look at how we can do it. Our debt as a share of the economy is already too high, but look at where it's going. These are actually pretty conservative estimates. We face a crushing burden of debt, which will take down our economy. It will lower our living standards. Actually, I asked the Congressional Budget Office to model the economy going forward. So they have these computer programs that simulate the U.S. economy. The computer program crashes in 2037 because it can't conceive of any way in which the U.S. economy can continue because of this massive burden of debt. You know, the economists tell us, when your debt gets to 90% as a share of your economy, you start slowing down and we stagnate. We prevent that from ever happening. Here's what would happen under our proposed budget, what we're calling the path to prosperity. As you can see, we won't come anywhere close to the tipping point, and we'll pay off the debt over time. So how will we do it? We will cut spending. Washington's unsustainable spending is driving the nation's permanent plunge into debt. Look at the growth of government under the current path we are on. The government grows to such high levels that by the time my 3 children are my age, the government will be twice the size for them than what it is for me. Our plan brings spending back down to the historic level of 20% as a share of our economy. Washington has not been telling you the truth. If we don't reform spending on government health and retirement programs, we have zero hope of getting our spending and as a result our debt crisis under control. Next year, the government spends 68 cents out of every dollar you pay in taxes just to pay for these health and retirement programs and interest on the debt. By the year 2025, they will consume every penny of every tax dollar you send to Washington. Our budget saves and strengthens these programs. It fixes the flaws in Medicare and Medicaid that have made rising costs nearly impossible to check. This is the only way these programs can hope to survive and function into the future. Look, we have a choice of 2 futures. We know the path we are on right now. That's the path the president's proposing. A debt crisis, no health and retirement security, a diminished future, a stagnant country, less jobs, less prosperity. That is not the America we know. We can choose this other path, but we have to make that choice. We can lift the crushing burden of debt off of our children and grandchildren, and we can get this economy growing today. It is up to our generation to pick this path. The question is, will we do it or not? It is up to us.
So I'm David Hale, I'm the coordinator of the Rockford Tea Party, and this is Christine Solis, who has so graciously come today and helped to organize this debate with Ulysses. And so Christine is now going to introduce the moderator and the debate participant.
Okay, Ethan Farr is a Guilford High School graduate, Rockford resident, and a student at Rock Valley College. Ethan, could you stand so we can see you? And thank you for being here today, Ethan. And our debate participant is Del Wasso, and I wasn't intending, I thought Ethan would be introducing Del, so I'm reading Ethan's handwriting.
Which is
although I could go off the cuff. Del has been a servant to our public good, as I see it, as a Marine for 6 years, and has also worked with the Department of Corrections for 20 years. And what else, Del? He also is the coordinator for the Rockford Sons of Liberty, and was the former coordinator for the Rockford Coffee Party. So thank you very much for being here, Del.
And I'd also like to now introduce Peter Thomas. Peter Thomas is one of our co-coordinators of Rockford Tea Party. He's also a businessman, a church leader, a community leader, and has been doing this kind of thing in community service for decades.
Don't make
so,
me that old.
For at least 10 years. So Peter Thomas, please stand up so you can be introduced. Thank you, Peter, for being the moderator. Ulysses S. Arn is the author of a book called The Arena of Ideas. He is a soldier for conservatism in this area. If you've ever seen his messages on Facebook or read his articles in the Register Star, you'll know that he's very, very conservative. He's also one of our co-coordinators for the Rockford Tea Party. He came up with this idea to have this debate today. He initially wanted to debate Kim McCloskey. Kim was unable to do that, so Del so graciously stepped in to come and debate Ulysses. So Ulysses, come to the podium, please. Thank you for being here. And now I'm going to hand this over to the moderators. Just a couple of rules. Listen to the moderators, and they're going to give you the rules.
I don't know what rules we have. The opening statement actually of 3 minutes each, and then we'll start with questions. So we did a flip of coin here earlier, and Ulysses, you're selected to be the opening person. So 3 minutes.
All right. I would like to thank everyone for coming to today's debate about America's future and the 2012 federal budget of Congressman Paul Ryan. None of you here today needs to be told the statistics or cited facts and figures in order to recognize that the situation this country finds itself in is not the place we are supposed to be as a nation. All of our problems are adding up, piling up, and are going to affect each and every one of us, not to mention generations not yet born. As Congressman Ryan has said, we have a choice of two futures. We know the path we are on right now: a debt crisis, no health and retirement security, a diminished future, a stagnant country, less jobs, less prosperity. That is not the America we know. For each and every problem confronting us, the Ryan budget plan gives us a solution. Our national leaders have spent the last several weeks arguing about the increasing the nation's debt limit. The Ryan budget plan, called the Path to Prosperity, pays off the debt. Now, we have a $14.3 trillion and growing national debt because Congresses and presidents past and present have deficits spent on the federal budget. Under the Ryan plan, the primary federal budget is balanced by 2015 with the oh-so-novel concept of less spending. Given yesterday's news that the unemployment rate rose to 9.2% and only 18,000 jobs were created last month, the job creation provisions of the Ryan plan cannot be understated. We can create the millions of jobs necessary to help out the 14.5 million people who are unemployed by unleashing our capitalist economy with lower tax rates and simplifying the tax code for both individuals and businesses. These and many more provisions of Paul Ryan's Path to Prosperity are desperately needed changes to the way Washington works and spends our money. I'm done.
Hello. Congressman Paul Ryan's so-called Path to Prosperity is a blatant example of class warfare, pitting the wealthiest of Americans against everyone else. Ryan has admitted that one of the goals of his budget wasn't merely to reduce the deficit, but also to drastically change forever America's social safety net. To this end, Ryan has written a right-wing, dream-come-true budget that promises his fellow conservatives the sun, the moon, and the stars, with an ideologically driven wish list of politically motivated budget cuts that Republicans have wanted to impose upon the American people for decades, ever since FDR's New Deal. The first thing Ryan does in his budget is slash 10% of all the taxes paid for by the highest income earners in America, down from 35% to 25%. This would be the lowest taxes our nation's billionaires have had to pay since 1931, before Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare even existed. Ryan justifies this massive tax cut for billionaires by lying to us, as so many Republicans have before him, by vowing that his tax cuts would compel our society's wealthy to trickle down upon our heads good-paying jobs for us all, and promising that prosperity will soon follow. Someone should tell the congressman that it is the demand for goods and services and the customer's ability to pay for them that stimulates job growth, not a wealthy employer's ability to simply hire someone new.
Yes, they should.
The Ryan budget proposes paying for this tax cut for billionaires with a Heritage Foundation trick he calls broadening the tax base, which means simplifying the tax code by shrinking the 6 tax brackets we currently have to some unspecified number in the future. He leaves it up to Congress to decide what the final number should be for those new tax brackets, which should immediately send up red flags, since there's no way that some middle-class Americans won't ultimately end up being taxed more in these fewer tax brackets that he proposes. Ryan's budget then makes drastic cuts to Medicare, turning the program into a voucher system in which our seniors will have to pay more, raids college student Pell Grants, welfare food stamps, and a long list of other government programs that unemployed and working poor Americans rely upon. Then, as if an afterthought, he also repeals the banking regulation that regulates the derivatives market that caused, in part, the housing bubble that kick-started our current recession in the first place. There is no question in my mind that Congressman Ryan's budget is indeed a path to prosperity. It is, unfortunately, a private path meant only for the wealthiest to travel down, but certainly not a path to prosperity for anyone else.
Okay, our first question, you talked in many areas of the tax and the deficit. I'd like to ask you to suggest 4 or 5 concrete, actionable steps that could be done to deal with these things.
Who was that question directed to?
It's directed at you.
All right, want to repeat it real quick, please?
Suggest 4 or 5 concrete, actionable steps that could be done to reduce the deficit and tax and revenue type measures that could be taken to effect that.
Well, part of the way the Ryan plan tackles our nation's debt and deficit is by bringing non-security discretionary spending to below 2008 levels. Since 2008 and the stimulus and the bailouts, federal government spending has shot up dramatically. Simply returning to that pre-level will go a long way towards tackling our $1.5 trillion national debt or annual deficits. Another aspect of the Ryan plan is to allow, as workers in the federal government retire, to allow those not to be replaced. So for a cut in the size of the federal workforce. Let's see. Another way that the Ryan plan tackles government spending is by repealing President Obama's health care law. As estimates have said, that is over $1 trillion or as high as a $2.5 trillion spending bill with massive tax increases. By repealing it and defunding it, that is a savings to the American people. And as the Ryan plan says, there can be patient-centered changes towards health care to fix the system.
You have more time.
I know. I have nothing to say.
Same question for Joe.
I am not going to stand up here and promote one budget over another, the president's versus the congressman.
President don't have one.
Technically, the congressman doesn't.
No interruptions, please.
Tell the truth. In the meantime,
Excuse me. Please, I'm going to have to ask you to stop.
just the possibilities are boundless. We could slap tariffs on goods coming into the country from China for a change of pace. That would likewise increase job growth here in America. Instead of buying something from a sweatshop in Beijing, you'll be buying it from an American-made business down the street. There's countless possibilities. Right now, the $14 trillion budget deficit that we face, it's $3 trillion above what it was back in 2008. Curiously, or not so curiously, the congressman only wants to reduce the deficit as it was when President Obama took office. Apparently, all the deficit spending that George Bush was responsible for is perfectly okay with the congressman. And if you really, really want to take down the deficit, that's not a solution. We can end the wars in Iraq. We can end the wars in Afghanistan. Right now, the congressman's budget doesn't make a single cut in the Pentagon's planned budget, and there's not a single penny taken away from it. That tells me he's planning until we're back into the black, that he wants us to stay in perpetual war. Now, I'm not a peacenik. I'm not going to stand up here and say, you know, we shouldn't have the military defending us, but there are lots of things we can do besides what the congressman is doing.
All right, I'd like to rebuttal one thing Del had said. mentioned the defense budget in Congressman Ryan's plan. And I quote from a summary that is sitting out on the table there. Prioritizing national security reflects $178 billion in savings identified by Defense Secretary Robert Gates, reinvesting $100 billion in higher military priorities and dedicating the rest to deficit reduction.
The congressman gives us no set numbers when it comes to the Pentagon budget whatsoever. Again,
$178 billion in savings as identified by Secretary of Defense Robert Gates.
$100 billion when faced with a $14 trillion deficit is nothing to brag about, especially when the occupation of Iraq alone cost $80 billion per year.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question now. Okay. This is going to be for Del. First, do we truly have a free market system when large corporations and banks can and do get hundreds of billions of dollars in tax subsidies, which are little more than taxpayer-funded corporate welfare handouts?
This is going to come to a shock to a lot of people, but we don't have a free market system. We never have. The only market that's out there that does not have government intervention is the black market, and that's criminal enterprise. The government has always and will always pick winners and losers, whether it is a subsidy for this company and another company that doesn't get one, or a higher tax rate for this company and a lower tax rate for a fourth. Right now, the government is picking winners and losers, and the choices they are making are not beneficial to the American people.
You guys aren't using your time.
Trying to get more questions in.
More questions.
Yeah. Can that repeat it, Ulysses?
Yeah, please repeat.
Okay. Do we truly have a free market system when large corporations and banks can and do get hundreds of billions of dollars in tax subsidies, which are little more than taxpayer-funded corporate welfare handouts?
Well, the tax subsidies, the tax credits, the tax deductions in the tax code are all legal.
Legal wasn't the question.
I know. I had more to say. Now, is it right that a corporation like General Electric can get away for 2 years running without paying any federal corporate income tax? No. That is why the Ryan plan broadens the tax base, lowers tax rates, simplifies the tax code, and ends the bailouts.
Can I rebut? Yes. The Ryan simplification does not apply to corporate taxes. He claims, he gives lip service to closing corporate loopholes, but gives no specifics. But he does specifically say that he is going to shrink our current 6 tax brackets on individual income, that's you people, to a lower amount. We don't know what that amount is. There is no way that middle-class Americans can be put inside of 6 tax brackets one day and not have to pay more in taxes when they're put in 5 or 4 or 3 tax brackets the next.
You'll listen to 30-second rebuttal.
Yes. Currently, the tax rates go 10%, 15, 25, I'm not sure if it's 28 or 31, 33, and 35%. By cutting the top tax rate for individuals and cutting the nation's corporate tax rate of 35% to 25%, most people will see a tax cut.
The cut he's referring to only refers to the highest income earners in America, the highest tax bracket alone. It does not apply to anyone in this room.
With the current top individual tax rate of 35% and several tax brackets in between that and 25%, many people will see tax cuts if the top rate is only 25%. Now, 25% tax bracket for people is important because the top income earners are the people who create jobs. I and no one else has ever been given a job by a poor person.
If it wasn't it wasn't for poor people walking into Walmart, Walmart wouldn't exist. Now,
we've rebutted back and forth there several times, so let's go on to another question. We hear the term small government or limited government or other types of phrases like that to, in effect, reduce the size. Give some ideas of your proposals for how the government could be reduced and thereby achieve some of these other things. Ulysses, you're first.
All right. Currently, federal government spending is 25% of gross domestic product. Under the Ryan plan, that is reduced to 20%. And furthermore, you can limit the size and scope of government by doing things like repealing President Obama's large expansion of the federal government by repealing his health care law. You can also do things like reduce regulations. There are $1.9 trillion worth of cost in regulatory compliance for businesses in the country. There are something like 80,000 pages in the federal regulatory book. For a comparison, my book is something like 90 pages, and it's a much easier read. You can further limit the size and the scope of the federal government by just having it do less. Things like reforming Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which have major implications on why our economy is in the situation it is right now. Let's see here. You can limit the government by not bailing out financial institutions, for example. You can do similar things along that nature.
I am not a fan of limited government. I am a fan of good government, no matter what its size. Limited government in 1941 would not have suited us well. When I hear someone talk about limited government, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the limits on government are already there. It's called the Bill of Rights. There are other limits on government scattered throughout the Constitution, but the limits on government are already there. When I hear someone talking about limited government, what they really mean, and I want you all to do an exercise, they want to take away our right as a democracy, a democratic people in a democratic society, to influence how businesses ran in this country. When you hear the word government, I want you to instantly add for and by the people and see how sinister some of this sounds. Our representatives are called representatives for a reason.
Rebuttal, Ulysses, 30 seconds.
Not at this time.
Okay. Next question. Okay.
This is going to be for Del to start. If debt reduction is the goal of the Paul Ryan budget, then why is the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, which recently passed Congressman's legislation, refuse to reduce the debt by any and all means and measures? Speaker Boner today has refused to discuss any measures or discuss repealing the Bush tax cuts, for example. And could you elaborate on why the Ryan budget simply is conservative social engineering, as Newt Gingrich put it?
Congressman Paul Ryan's budget is conservative social engineering. It doesn't rely upon any input from liberals or Democrats. It doesn't want any input from liberals or Democrats. And it targets who they perceive as their political opposition as for defunding, and enriches those that they believe are worthy of their consideration. The congressman's plan, he was asked what it was going to do, everything that he said it was going to do, which is hardly set in stone. He described it as not merely as a plan to reduce the deficit, but to replace the social safety hammock. That's what he calls our social safety net. He has, like a lot of conservatives do in this room, designs on making sure that the haves have and the have-nots, well, we can step over them.
First of all, President Bush's tax cuts did not add to the deficit. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that the Bush tax cuts, when passed, would cost the government in revenue somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 billion. Over the course of the Bush tax cuts, government revenue increased by no less than $100 billion. Currently, government revenues are at record levels. We have deficits and budgetary problems because the federal government spends too much.
In 2002, the federal deficit was at $6 trillion. By the time George Bush left office, it was up to $11 trillion. We are now up here debating a $14 trillion deficit. You can do the math. Our deficit has increased by $3 trillion. Everything else fell under, and I'm not gonna point a finger at President Bush, even though I would love to. We did have 9/11, we did have the war on terror, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But don't try and blow smoke without actually trying to start a fire. This deficit that we are facing, there's a reason why Congressman Ryan only wants to return the deficit to 2008 limits, because that's when the last Republican president said, this is where we're going to set it, and this is okay.
Under President Bush, the single worst deficit he had was $450 billion.
That is not true.
It's a fact. President Obama's deficits have all been in the $1 trillion range. This year's federal budget deficit is projected by the CBO to be $1.65 trillion. His own 2012 budget forecasted to be $1.2 trillion.
That is true.
In future years, under President Obama's budget, the deficit never falls below $600 billion. There is a spending problem in Washington, and that has to stop.
Mr. Arn believes that everyone in this room has a short memory. For decades, we were told if we cut taxes on the wealthiest Americans, tax revenues will increase. At no time during the Bush administration did that revenue materialize. Once again, 2002, following the enactment of the Bush tax cuts, our deficit shot up to $6 trillion. By the time George Bush left office, it was up to 11. We are now at 14. Do the math.
I think we've exhausted that question. Maybe to change the pace just a little bit here, Medicare is one of the things that's a centerpiece of all of the plans and all the concern these days. I'd like some of your ideas on how to reform the Medicare system, which we all know is actuarially going to collapse in some number of years and needs to be fixed somehow, but no one seems to come up with a plan. What do you propose in terms of fixing Medicare? Ryan's made one plan. What are the alternatives?
Well, I personally think the Ryan plan is the right plan. Ryan's change to Medicare is to make it for those aged 55 and above to leave it alone. If you're 55 and under, like I am, Medicare would become a voucher or premium payment support style system where you would get a stipend from the Medicare program to pay for private health care insurance.
I hope everyone heard that part.
Yeah.
Excuse me a moment here as I find a piece of information for you. As it stands now, the federal government spends $519 billion on Medicare. That is gobbling up the federal budget because that is one of the largest increasing aspects of it. We have to get a control on our entitlement spending. Social Security is $700 billion in government spending. Medicaid is $270 billion. Paul Ryan, as part of changing Medicaid, makes that a block grant program for the states instead of a one-size-fits-all program. I know many of you here are or near Medicare age. You probably have spent most of your lives anticipating being able to be dependent on that as you retire. As the chief actuary of the Medicare and Medicaid Trust Fund has said, it has 13 years or less until it goes bankrupt. We have to make changes and reforms to the program in order to save it. If we don't, it goes away, and that will be very painful and very serious and drastic cuts for everybody. The Ryan plan's voucher changes to it stop that from happening.
Burning the village does not save the village. The reason I mentioned the voucher systems going to private insurance companies is because mechanically there's very little difference between Congressman Ryan's plan for Medicare and what the President's plan is for everyone else. The reason the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, didn't delve into Medicare more than the percentage that it did was because 80% of Medicare's costs are borne by seniors in the last 2 years of their lives. 80% of Medicare costs are borne by seniors in the last 2 years of their lives, when medical costs are astronomical and there's no way interjecting a for-profit middleman into that equation is going to alleviate the situation. Now, I'm not going to say that, we need to, Medicare will, as is, without any fixes, face some problems in the very near future. But a lot of these fixes are easy. We can simply repeal, as they were supposed to, the Bush tax cuts, and Medicare would pay for itself.
Del mentioned President Obama's health care law and Medicare. The Obamacare cuts $500 billion from the program.
This is true. Again, 80% of Medicare costs are borne by seniors in the last 2 years of their lives. The other 20%, those are seniors who are not in the last 2 years of their lives, and the Affordable Health Care Act would be applicable.
Here's how, if I can real quickly, here's how you can, what you can do with $500 billion. At $12,000 per person, you could pay for 10 years of coverage for 41 million people at my insurance rate of $1,200 a year. So $12,000 for 10 years, you can cover 41 million people. I know not everybody has medical insurance as cheaply as I do, but that gives you an example. There are 45 million people on Medicare. Privatized insurance can help lower the cost curve on Medicare, which is part of the problem with our deficit.
Okay. Can I rebut? Yeah.
No. Oh, okay.
The problem with our deficit isn't because old people are dying. The problem with our deficit is a combination of factors. But old people passing away is not one of them.
Right. Live forever.
There is no way that people in the last 2 years of their lives can be blamed for this deficit. Again, 80% of all Medicare costs are old people in the last 2 years of their life.
Okay, we got that. We got it. Moving on.
The point is, if somebody believes that that is what's causing the deficit, give me a break.
Move on. Let's move on. Next question.
Corporation or company never appears in the Constitution. Should corporations have constitutional rights to influence our elections, as two recent high-profile split decision rulings by the Supreme Court have suggested? And is that fair to citizens who are not members of corporations?
Yep.
We are endowed by rights by God. Corporations are endowed by their privileges by people. Yet right now, courtesy of 2 Supreme Court cases in the last 2 years, corporations have as much influence on our electoral process as everyone in this room. Everyone in this room, I'll grant that it could be more. Right now, we have an electoral system that is broken, and we are rewarding it with tax cuts. Congressman Ryan's budget makes no distinction. He makes no distinction whatsoever between the highest income earners and those corporations. Furthermore, when he does say he's going to fill up a tax loophole, which he claims is, going to be part of the reason why our tax system is broken, he doesn't give anything more than lip service to it. There's nothing substantive about fixing any of those loopholes. He just says he's going to.
Clarification purpose, I know you're referring to the Citizens United case. What is the second case you're referring to?
There was a second case where women sought relief from Walmart.
Oh, okay, that case, thank you. Okay. I guess to zoom this out a little bit, what is a corporation? A corporation is a voluntary association of two individuals or more who come together for economic interest. If 2 individuals come together for political interest, they form a political party or a tea party or a coffee party. If individuals want to, the same 2 individuals want to use what they receive in profit from their economic association to influence their political association, what is wrong with that?
Members of the Tea Party.
Don't interrupt.
No, I was done.
I was asking.
I was done.
Oh, you're done. Okay.
Members of the Tea Party can be drafted and go off to the next war. The Tea Party itself cannot. That's what's wrong with it.
We don't have a draft.
We could.
But we don't.
Just move on. New question.
There are some pettiness going on right now. The reality is, the corporations do not have the same rights as citizens, and I question the patriotism of the person who says they do.
Let's change topics a little bit and talk about unemployment, which is on everybody's minds these days. It's 9.1 and just gone to 9.2%. But we know that really is a fictitious number, actually, because there's so many people that are underemployed, working in jobs far below what they might have made before. Give some comments on how we raise the employment and also the wage levels for people who are employed. Because a better measure, I think, than unemployment might be the total payrolls in an area, because that's the number that really drives the economy. People being employed at a minimum wage job don't really have a lot of disposable income, but people at higher wage jobs are the ones that drive the engine. So comments on how we fix the unemployment to get job generation going.
Let's see here. According to estimates of the Ryan Plan, if implemented, 1 million jobs would be created in the first year and 2.5 million in the final year of the decade. Let's see. The Ryan Plan would increase gross domestic product by over $1.5 trillion over the decade. It would add $1.1 trillion in higher wages, averaging $1,000 per year per family. Now, it accomplishes this by doing the historically proven thing of lowering taxes. When Ronald Reagan dropped the top marginal tax rate from 70 to 28%, the federal government's revenue doubled and 19 million jobs were created. And the same thing can be shown throughout history. In the 1920s, the tax cuts then increased government revenue and created jobs, hence the Roaring 20s. When John Kennedy did it in the 60s, he increased government revenue and created jobs. Reagan did it. when Bush cut taxes. He increased government revenue and had the record for most consecutive months of job creation at 4.5 years. Now there's another aspect of the Ryan Plan that ties directly into job creation. Moving this nation towards energy independence. By drilling for more oil, mining more coal, more natural gas, more nuclear energy. North Dakota has the Balkan oil formation. They're drilling for that oil. They have 4% unemployment.
The question again? Yes. Well, kind of generally phrased, but how would you propose generating job growth and also payroll growth with that?
To promote job growth, the first thing I would do is stop sending them to China. To promote wage increases for the average American worker, I would propose stop busting unions. Don't interrupt, please. We do not create jobs by simply giving potential employers tax breaks. While tax cuts for potential employers may help, the reality is, if you own a business that can make 500 widgets a month, you will not hire someone else to make 600 widgets until you can sell 600 widgets. The way we do that is we increase the ability of people who have a demand for a good or a service by making sure that they have the money for that good or service. There are several ways we can do that. Not all of them would be popular. The earned tax income credit, rebuilding our bridges that are falling into our rivers with government jobs. If the private sector could address this situation, they would be. And it's just that simple. This idea that business is somehow being hamstrung, it's ridiculous.
Del mentioned China. Whenever you hear a story about why a business or a company is leaving the United States, whether it's for China or India or anywhere else, you should really look at the reason why. And when you look at the reason why, it comes down to some very basic things. Their tax rates, regulations. Well, yeah, basically it's tax rates and regulations. If you affected lower tax rates, you would encourage businesses to come here.
Are you promoting a Chinese form of government regulation here?
No, when you talk about reducing regulations, you don't have to get rid of 7,999 pages out of the federal regulatory system. You just have to get rid of the ones that don't make any sense. The EPA has a rule.
What doesn't make sense to a business employer makes perfect sense to the employee.
The EPA has a rule. Painters, when they're painting the outside, have to lay down a plastic tarp underneath what they're doing, underneath everything. That conflicts with OSHA regulations. If you affected the regulations in that manner, streamlined them, took out the gunk in them, you would spur job creation. Like I said earlier, $1.9 trillion is spent complying with government regulatory.
Anecdotal evidence for certain industries is all fine and dandy, but the reality is when you want to repeal the law, the Dodd-Frank law that's on the books that regulates the derivatives market, that's the type of regulation that these Republicans are talking about. And those regulations will guarantee that we have one recession after another, after another, after another.
We're going to move on. Was it me?
That's you.
Yes. Okay. All right, this would be for Del. Should we trust Ryan's numbers in his proposal? I'm sorry, let me elaborate a little bit more. We actually ran out of most of our questions that we wrote up earlier, so we're going to be kind of going on the cuff, if that's all right with you two.
Yeah, no, more questions is good.
Okay, we got time. Absolutely. All right, so should his numbers of how his figures were calculated should they be trusted?
All right, there's two parts to this, two answers to this question, and they're both related. Initially, Congressman Ryan got his numbers from the right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation. They used a dynamic model that the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, does not use, because they believe that it's voodoo, where the Heritage Foundation and Congressman Ryan believe that they can somehow figure out the value of competition. I don't see how they can do that, but they claim that they can. In the meantime, while I'm not going to go into whether or not that particular number should be disputed or not, Congressman Ryan, in his budget, leaves unknown variables. He does not tell us what the new tax brackets are going to be. He does not tell us what kind of loopholes he's going to close on corporate America. There's no way you can come up with accurate numbers with such giant omissions.
Okay, two points here. First of all, federal budgets are frameworks. They are not actual legislation.
Conceded. I agree.
It is.
That comes later in the actual spending appropriation bills in the actual tax code. That comes later. Budget framework is the framework upon which those appropriations and tax code bills are written. Now, about dynamic and non-dynamic scoring of legislation. The CBO does non-dynamic scoring of legislation. They believe that changes in the tax code don't affect behavior. You and I both know that changes in tax code, whether higher or lower, affect behavior. And by affecting behavior, they affect how much government revenue would come in through taxes. Maryland, for example, imposed a couple of years ago a special tax on the state's millionaires. There were 3,000 of them. They anticipated that new tax would generate $1 million or $100 million in new revenue. 1,000 of those Maryland millionaires left the state's tax rolls altogether, and the state coffers were short $100 million.
When we can stop catering to the billionaires, we can start being a country again. This idea that everything comes from above, well, above isn't Mark Zuckerberg, okay? It isn't Bill Gates. We don't have soldiers in Iraq dying today, tomorrow, next week, so that their surviving spouses can pay more in taxes than GE does. There is something wrong with that. If they can't pay their share, then what are we doing? Who are we as a nation?
Kind of in connection with that, and we hear the phrase, tax the rich. And that's been sort of the topic of what you just talked about.
I just like
Let me finish the question, please. Within the tax code, as it is right now, the top 50% of people pay all of the tax. The bottom 50% pay nothing.
There's another number.
Or, in fact, at the lower end of that, they actually get payments from the government.
That's not true.
There's another number. When somebody says that the top 50% pay 50%, or pay some other number, the reality is most taxes come from just the top 10%.
That's my.
But when you
finish the question, I was.
But when you include the other 40% beneath that, it's not intellectually honest.
The point being, we hear tax the rich as being the mantra, and Obama recently was talking about taxing private jets. I saw this statistic that if that tax was in fact done, it would take 5,000 years.
This is true.
To
no dispute.
Affect a meaningful amount of money. So it's a bit of a red herring to tax something that's so visible but yet really meaningless.
I don't believe so. I think he was.
Could I finish the question, please?
Yes.
Okay.
you keep jumping in and I don't get to finish it, and you're saying some of the points I was trying to make. In fact, the top 10% of the people paid 70% of the taxes. How do you justify the idea of taxing the rich with the fact that they are already paying most of the tax? And the people at the bottom end are paying little or none, and in fact at the lower end actually receive payments.
We have a problem in this country with employment. It's not merely the numbers of people that don't have a job. It is also how much wages and benefits those that do have a job, how much they currently earn. The reason all of those people at the top end have all that money and pay all of those taxes is because there's been an economic shift in the last 50 years that has sent all that money to one end of our economy. It wasn't always like that, and it shouldn't be that way. When a family, we hear about conservative values and family values. When both members of a family have to work to send their kid to college, you're either going to get an uneducated junior, and you're going to have to, and mom's going to stay at home, or you're going to have to decide whether or not leaving junior unattended in his teen years is okay if you want to get him the college education that he needs. Right now, we have a wealth redistribution to the top, and it shouldn't be that way. Not that it should be redistributed to everyone else, but our tax code isn't fair. And anyone who wants to contest that, they can do that. You're free to do so. But I don't personally think that someone who's got rich sending jobs off to China should get a tax break.
About taxes, let me again zoom out a little bit. The federal government does not get a dime unless it confiscates it from someone else first.
Taxation with representation is not confiscation.
Del, please wait.
Please let him finish. Thank you.
All right. Now, like I said, Curly, the top rate now is 35%. Under the Reagan plan, that will be lowered to 25%. Allowing the American people, no matter their income, to keep more of their money is good. It's not wealth redistribution from the top up, or top down up. Where am I going? Okay. Now, like Peter said, 47% will pay no federal taxes at all for 2009. This is an AP story. Either their incomes were too low or they qualified for enough credits, deductions, and exemptions to eliminate their liability. Let's see. A family of 4 making as much as $50,000 will owe no federal tax for 2009 as long as there are 2 children younger than 17 and, let's see, they filed jointly. Let's see. Like Peter said, the top 10% households making an average of $366,000 will pay 73% of the tax bill, and this was for 2006. The bottom 40% on average make a profit from federal income tax. We have some major problems with the tax code. The Ryan plan cuts rates, simplifies the tax code, eliminates loopholes, bans emerges, and everything else, making the program, broadening the tax base, simplifying the tax code, and trying to create more taxpayers.
It raises taxes on middle-class Americans. It lowers taxes on people who are sending our jobs overseas. And there is nothing in the Ryan plan that's going to stimulate wage increases or benefit increases.
Okay, folks, we're going to do something real different. This is the first time we've had something like this. So we really don't know exactly the time frame, so we're kind of just feeling it out. Of course, this is grassroots. This is not AstroTurf. So we don't really have a big predetermined plan. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to ask the audience to ask one question each from the Coffee Sons of Liberty side, and another question from the Tea Party side. The first question will go to Del, but they both answer the questions. The second question will go to Ulysses, but they both answer the questions. So, I have nobody picked out. I don't know who I'm going to pick about, who, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask these two gentlemen to pick who they want to answer the two questions, okay? Now, I know most of the Tea Party people, and I don't recognize a lot of Rockford Party people. So, if you want to answer a question from the left, raise your hand, and these two gentlemen will pick you out, okay? Look at your audience, who you want to pick.
I made the last question, but Evan.
Well, first we have someone from the coffee party to ask a question.
Yes. Okay. Here, let me give you the mic so everybody can hear you.
Thank you. I was,
It's got to be about fiscal issues.
yeah, it is. But I will, short advertisement. I was at the founding of the Coffee Party in Louisville, Kentucky convention. Coffee Party USA, Coffee Party USA. Okay. We're not very good cheerleaders. At any rate, I am 62 years old. And I am terribly underemployed. And teacher, social worker, good work history, and yet, like so many Americans, I'm struggling. I had a tenant move into my basement just to make my rent. I have a...
Question.
Okay. I have a 15-year-old car about to go out, etc. I was employed in one of these damn government programs. I was working 20 hours a week, minimum wage. They cut it to 13 hours, like July 1st. That's government saving. I'm asking one of you gentlemen how much deficit was saved when they cut me and all the people that I work for finding jobs for seniors. People who are desperate. I work with seniors every day trying to find jobs. They can't find jobs. My job is to find jobs with them. Myself and the 8 people that I work with were cut from 20 hours to 13 hours. Let me finish, Del. We're cut from 20 hours to 13 hours. We cannot survive, and that saved how much money from the deficit? I want to ask Republicans that. Thank you.
Would you like to go first?
Thank you.
There is a long-standing economic philosophy. There are several, actually. Keynesian economics, I'm sure there's a lot of people in here who have heard of that term before, which says that when times are good, certain amounts of money should be socked away for when times aren't so good. We're not really good at saving money in the United States. But if we did, when times get bad, infrastructure spending, hopefully not from deficit spending, but infrastructure spending makes sense. It makes sense because your bridges need to be built, your roads need to be repaved, so on and so on and so on. The goal is to keep people employed until that bump is over and done with. The idea that we're always going to hit bumps. How rough those bumps are can be mitigated.
Hold on, folks. We're going to let Ulysses answer, and then we'll have a short rebuttal.
Let the folks there get through the door. Not to focus in specifically on your situation, sir, but if you're out of work, if you're struggling to make ends meet, you make it your job, if you're unemployed, to find work. If you're struggling to make ends meet, people take on second and third jobs. You try whatever you can to be self-sufficient. Del mentioned Keynesian economics. FDR's Keynesian economics, aka the New Deal, was, according to FDR's Treasury Secretary, I believe it was 1938, said, we have spent a lot of money and we have just as much unemployment today as we did when this administration started 8 years ago. And we have an enormous debt to boot.
Unemployment under FDR was only up 1 year, 1938.
Let him finish the question.
Like I said, after 8 years of FDR's New Deal policies, unemployment was as high as it was before the program started. There is an economic analysis done by a couple of economists that says that Keynesian New Deal economics made the Great Depression last longer and be worse. Government spending does not help the economy. Look at what is going on right now. I've got an anecdotal story here for you. You all saw the reinvestment recovery signs. I saw one just south on I-39 on Rochelle. All they did was dig and fill the same holes over and over and over again. That is not a job, that is make work. If you want a job, you have to provide a product, good, or service that the people want, need, and desire.
Del gets to rebut.
It is immoral. While we are sending jobs to Mexico, Indonesia, Malaysia, China, and in very near future, Colombia, it is immoral to send jobs to overseas and then tell people that were tossed out onto the street, fend for yourselves.
Right on.
One more. Government spending took this nation to its lowest unemployment rate in history, 2%, in 1941.
1941 was when the Second World War started.
Let's hear it for government spending.
Ready for war?
Next question. You guys, can we choose an audience member for the next question, please?
For a Tea Party person.
Tea Party people.
Okay. This lady in green. We haven't heard a lady.
Let's hear from the ladies.
Hi, I just heard yesterday that we can spend all we want on infrastructure and building schools and things like that, but that doesn't create taxpayers. Those are not jobs that are going to stay on. They're the fixing holes thing that, you know, has to occur anyway. Yes, I believe our infrastructure needs help, but we need much more local employment, much more grassroots employment, small businesses stimulated. I don't think that, how would you both react to that? That it doesn't create taxpayers, that you know, new taxpayers.
Yeah, a big premise of the Ryan plan in lowering the tax rates and simplifying the tax code is to broaden the tax base, to create more taxpayers. Government, as Linda McMahon so well put, does not create jobs. An entrepreneur takes a risk. If he or she can sell that product, good, or service for more than it costs to make, they create a job. That is very simple logic. If that's too complicated for you to understand, after we're done here today, I'm going to stand outside on Mulberry Street on the sidewalk for everybody, and I'll be happy to explain that concept to you. If you want, let's take, for example, my employer. My employer, based on the nature of their business, are rich. They're in the top tax brackets. By lowering their tax burden, that improves the ability for them to invest more into the company. More investment into the company means that they can produce more products to sell to their customers or to get new customers. More customers, new products means more sales. More sales means more revenue. More revenue means more work. More products, more products means more work. More work means they can hire new people. New people means that they're generating more revenue, which they share with us.
If tax cuts created new jobs, then those companies that paid no taxes in 2010 should have phenomenal growth. It didn't happen. The reason it didn't happen was because that's not how you make jobs. A man without a penny in his pocket can create a job going door to door with a service or something to sell. And it's that simple. The problem isn't because the rich can't hire somebody. The problem is because the rich can't sell what they can no longer sell to, they have lost their customers. Our wages have stagnated. Our cost of living has flatlined. We're paying more out of pocket for benefits that used to be perks of the job. Gasoline prices are killing us. The reality is the rich could be hiring. They're not. They're not because they can't sell any more than what they already are.
Okay, again, about taxes. If you lower the tax rates for individuals, for everybody, like the Bush tax cuts were, across the board, everybody got a tax cut, that allows the people to keep more of what they earn. If you are allowed to keep more of what you earn, you can spend, save, or investment as you see fit. That is how you generate incentive for more economic growth and more economic development. By lowering the tax rates like the Ryan plan does, the jobs will come.
Tax
As
cuts.
historically proven by Ronald Reagan. When he cut the tax rates and 19 million jobs were created just in his administration. That growth and job creation continued for 25 years.
He also raised taxes 11 times. But look, if tax cuts alone, I'm not saying that tax cuts don't have an effect. They do. What I'm saying is that they only have an effect if you have somebody out there that can purchase whatever it is that you're selling. If they can't buy what you're selling, if you make 500 and can sell 500 widgets a month, until you can sell 600, they're not going to hire anybody. And it doesn't matter how much more money they have.
We're not going to take any more questions today. Sorry, time constraints, but hopefully if we can do this again sometime, we will have a little bit more time for that. And we are going to ask one more question, and we'll let them have their closing statements. All right. This is coming from me. And, okay. Ryan's staff instructed, when calculating a lot of the numbers, to assume that revenues remained at 19% of GDP. Is that a fair assumption?
Who are you directing that one at?
Yeah, we'll do Del.
No, do him first.
No, go ahead, Del.
No, you can't answer it.
No, I will. I will
Nine-
answer.
19% of GDP is wholly unrealistic. It pictures an explosive growth that simply won't materialize. It can't materialize. Our cost as citizens is so prohibitive. We are literally living paycheck to paycheck, most of us anyways. The quality of our lives is one indicator of wealth, but it is not the only indicator. If you consider yourself middle class, but you spend all of your your expendable income, all of it, making sure that you pay that cell phone off, that you got the cable turned on, and you have nothing left over, you are not middle class. You are poor, living beyond your means.
Why do you have a cell phone and cable?
Okay, so we're going to do closing statements now, or did you get a chance?
Yeah, no, I got a response here to this.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
All right. The Ryan plan's estimation of 19% of government revenue to GDP is an historical average, or thereabouts. In this 70-page plus plan of the Ryan budget, it says that. Historical average, 19% is what the government gets in revenue, no matter what the tax rate is.
That's the Heritage Foundation's numbers.
Well, it's the plan's numbers, too.
The plan was drafted by a man named Leach from the Heritage Foundation.
Come on.
All right, now about middle class. There is no class structure in this country.
Yeah.
If you make a little bit today, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from being, quote, rich tomorrow. If you are rich today, there is nothing stopping you from being dead broke tomorrow. That is not a class system. That is a free market capitalist economy. That middle class stuff originated, if I may, in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. If I may, about the quick book review here. This is a pile of garbage.
I agree.
Debate prep.
The difference between me and the conservatives in this room isn't socialism, nor is it Marxism, nor is it communism. The difference between me and the conservatives in this room is laissez-faire capitalism. I'm a firm believer that as an American, my voice counts. And if that means that I don't want mercury coming out of your factory, I'm going to speak up. The reality is.
That's fine. All right, so what we're going to do is I just need to make a couple of announcements, and then we're going to do closing statements. And upon the last word of the last closing statement, if everybody wants to hang out until 12, you can. But we have to be out of this auditorium by like 5 minutes to 12. Okay, so how long do they have for closing statements? 2 minutes each? 3 minutes each? Okay, that's a lot of time, so I hope you guys can fill it up. So just a couple of announcements. Closing statements. Who gets the first closing statement? Who had the first opening statement?
I did.
You had the opening? Okay, so you get the first closing. Or do you want the
I'll make this short.
Okay.
Because I don't want to have a prepared statement. I'm incredibly nervous up here. I don't count public speaking as one of my high points. I'm filling in for somebody who couldn't make it today. But I hope you were at least entertained. There are certain ideals and values that we all hold in common. Those are what bond us as Americans. Me and Mr. Arn are arguing two sides of a particular political issue. Even if we don't see eye to eye, at least in this type of forum, we can see the other person's point of view, even if we disagree with it. And I would like to thank both the Rockford Coffee Party and the Rockford Tea Party for this opportunity, so that people who have not heard the other side, even as inarticulate as I gave it, you had the opportunity to hear what someone else has to say on a particular matter.
First of all, Congressman Schilling, thank you for attending. Del, thank you for filling in for Tim McCloskey. It was my goal, it was my hope here today that I convinced each and every one of you to not only become fans of the Ryan budget, to become advocates for it. I may not have succeeded, but I at least tried. Because the items, the propositions, the proposals, the aspects of the Ryan plan deserve their public airing. They deserve the public's support. There is nothing in the Ryan plan that is evil, that is dastardly, that is wrong. It is common sense. Government spends too much. The Ryan plan lowers spending. You and I, as individuals, can, by borrowing, live beyond our means, but only for a limited period of time. Why, then, should that not apply to the federal government?
I want to thank Del Wasso for filling in. I want to thank Ulysses S. Arn for coming up with this idea. I want to thank both our moderators, Ethan and Peter. We greatly appreciate that. One thing that I think we can take away from this is this. We can get together. We might not agree. We should at least talk, okay? And, you know, I heard something from Del. Del said he agrees that lowering taxes does spur economic growth. One thing I heard from Ulysses, we need a viable energy plan. That's both. We're agreeing on some things here. We might not agree on it all, but we can agree on some things. So please, give a round of applause to all of our leaders and hopefully we'll have